Thank you, Antonio. So this morning we heard basic issues and problems we face with education. So in the afternoon session, we're going to bring in the issue of sustainability. And I'm particularly going to focus on the issue of climate change. So let me give you, I'm trying to advance this. So just a couple of minute background. Why are we talking about climate change? When we burn, when we burn anything, be it fossil fuel or wood or leaves, what comes out is the gas called carbon dioxide. Since the dawn of the industrial era, 1750, it took us 220 years to put the first trillion tons of carbon dioxide. Trillion ton is 1,000 billion tons, okay? And after that, it just took us 40 years to put the second trillion. Just imagine the sheer weight of the pollution we are adding to the planet, okay? And those of you are thinking in terms of kilograms, 1 trillion ton is 1 followed by 15 zeros of kilograms. And we are right now putting about 40 billion tons every year. So what that means is the next trillion will be added by year 2030. The most direct effect of that carbon dioxide, about 45% stays in the air, rest goes into the ocean, and some to the land. The CO2 which enters the ocean becomes carbonic acid, makes the ocean acidic. There's just no controversy or doubt about that. Measurements have been made about the acidity. The 40% which stays in the air traps the heat which would otherwise escape to space. That's again basic quantum mechanics. The reason I'm emphasizing, you hear about the media, about the controversy, I'm starting with issues in which there's no controversy. The amount of heat trapped, we know within 15%. That's equal to making the sun shine brighter by more than 1%. Our best idea, based on calibration with the past and physics, is that each trillion ton warms the planet by 3/4 of a degree. So we already put enough stock of gases to heat the planet by 1.5 degrees, and the planet has already warmed by 1 degree. It'll spit out the rest 0.5 degree in the next 20, 30 years. So by 2030, we would have added CO2 to warm the planet by 2.25 degrees. And if we go to 2030, which is just 15 years around the corner, with no act, we would have put the 4th trillion and commit the planet to 3 degrees. There are numerous things I can talk about. I don't have time what that means, but just relating to the beautiful talk we had from Mr. Sanchez-Taran on the drought causing conflict. It's a fundamental thermodynamic law. Each degree warming evaporates water as vapor, by 7 to 15%. Our trees would be drying at that rate, our lakes, our rivers, our snowpacks. We see that in California. We are suffering the worst drought. The drought has depleted our snowpack to something once in 500 years. Our forests are burning, all because of this thermodynamic law. No one can escape that. Then there is sea level rise. So as scientists like me working in this area for the last 4 decades, we are seeing the cliff. And so, but fortunately, I have some good news to talk about. In this, probably the biggest battle of our life we are facing, there is a new alliance forming between science, religion, and policy. As a member of this academy, I had the privileged front row seat you're having watching this alliance form. And so you may ask, how long has the church been interested, or this academy been interested in climate change? I dug up this journal, this article only last 2 days ago. In 1980, led by another famous French, like our French physicist Pierre Léna, Professor Lapierre, who is the president of the French Academy of Science, and he is also a member of this academy. Just talk about 2 papers presented there. The first one is titled Role of Energy in the Life of Mankind, Lifestyles and Distributed Justice. This is amazing. This is what I've been talking about the last year. And I didn't realize somebody had already talked about this 35 years ago. And it says, I don't want to read everything, the weather and the atmosphere itself all being degraded, fortunately not yet beyond recovery. That was 1980. Now, many of us working in this field think we will go beyond that point of recovery if we don't do anything in the next 20, 30 years. So it's just our generation lifetime. Same thing with another scientist. He talks about energy and environment, how we will degrade systematic drifts in the Earth system, and triggering mechanism. We are already seeing this triggering mechanism. Major part of the West Antarctic ice sheet is already at an unstable melting. Arctic sea ice has lost 40% of its summer ice. So many of these things these people predicted is happening, unfortunately, and we are still not doing anything about it. Now comes a ray of hope. I joined this academy 10 years ago. I'm not the ray of hope. I am just saying I was a witness here. And teaming up with Professor Paul Crutzen, a Nobel laureate, member of this academy, a Swedish meteorologist, Bengtsson, and I, we organized this meeting on glaciers. We learned from famous Austrian other glaciologists, Alps has already lost 70% of its mass. What was unique about that meeting, at least for me, is that this is a meeting of physicists, chemists, and atmospheric scientists like me. We, in our concluding statement, we said if we want justice and peace, we must protect the habitat that sustains us. Of course, that sentence was written by our Chancellor Marcello, but everyone signed on to that. It's at that meeting I realized the power of this academy in effecting change. And, let me go back. That statement says we must protect the habitat that sustains us. Let's talk about who the we is and who the us are. It's right after this, I went on a sabbatical, spent about 4 months living in villages in India. It's there I discovered, in fact, we are living in 2 worlds. The top 1 billion, we live as if there is unlimited access to fossil fuels, and we consume 50% of the total energy, 15 terawatts, and we are responsible for 60% of the greenhouse gases, the trillion tons there. Contrast that with the bottom 3 billion, they are still living with 18th century's technology. That woman there, I was her house guest for 4 or 5 days. She's in the Himalayas. And she's burning firewood not because she wants to destroy the forest. She has no access. She can't afford fossil fuels. And her contribution to global warming greenhouse gas is less than 5%. And we all know who is going to suffer the worst consequences. So, in contrast to what we discussed in the morning, how we should educate the poor children, my thesis is we need to educate the top 1 billion first. Okay? And so let's continue that message. So we proposed this. At that time, it was Pope Benedict, who was the Pope here. So I presented this in a meeting of the Pontifical Academy of Social Science. In the audience was Professor Partha Dasgupta and Joe Stiglitz. So they said, why not, we should have a joint meeting. We came to Chancellor Marcello. Of course, he's a champion of these such meetings at the Academy. He immediately approved it. In the meantime, Pope Francis became the Pope by the time we organized this meeting. So we met for 3 days. At the end of the 3 days, it was my greatest privilege to brief about this meeting to Pope Francis. I was looking at probably the greatest moral leader of this 21st century, and I was talking to him about morality of climate change. And mind you, the proceedings of that meeting, Das Gupta and I summarized it in an article in Science. It was remarkable. Jeffrey Sachs was in that meeting, and there were several Nobel laureates, all physicists, chemists, biologists. We didn't talk about profound biological, physical issues. We said sustainable relationship with nature requires change in attitude towards nature and towards each other. I interpret it as the top 1 billion caring about what happens to the bottom 3 billion, right? Every time I get on a plane and consume a ton of CO2, I may be displacing somebody else. That's what climate change is. So we said it requires moral leadership. And we were bold enough to say that because we have a great moral leader right in this church. And the next one, it is not just restricted to Christian religion. So what we said is finding ways to develop a sustainable relationship with our planet requires not only the engagement of scientists, political leaders, and civil societies, but ultimately a moral revolution. Okay? What is our relationship with nature? Religious institutions can and should take the lead on bringing about such a new attitude towards creation. And immediately after that, Chancellor Marcello took it up. He teamed up with Jeff Sachs. And I talked to you about science and religion. Now we bring policy. So right in this hall, we had invited UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and you see Cardinal Turkson behind Ban Ki-moon, and then Chancellor Marcello. And that declaration from that starts with climate change as a scientific reality. We didn't have to have the kind of debate I have in the US about reality of climate change. And then it says, in this core moral space, so the moral argument was accepted, the world's religions play a very vital role. And immediately after that meeting, a month later, the Laudato Si was released, and each one of us have our own favorite paragraphs, favorite chapter. Mine is the one which talks about integral ecology, the interaction between natural systems and social systems. That diagram is mine. That's not from Laudato Si. So what does that mean? I'll give you one example, which I've been spent sleepless nights on. As the climate warms, we are thinking, my own work suggests we're going to see 2-degree warming in another 30 years. Okay, maybe 35 years maximum. How is the top 1 billion going to respond? Would we just focus locally and say, oh, my house is getting hot, I'm going to get more air conditioning? If you do that, that would be a disastrous step. Each ton of the refrigerant hydrofluorocarbons has the same warming effect as 2,000 tons of CO2. We will see a huge amplification. Or we are now talking about 2 meters of sea level rise this century. How is Bangladesh? Where are they going to go? And what will be the kind of conflicts we heard from our colleague, which is going to happen in South Asia, and so on and so forth. So the possibilities are unfortunately limitless. We got to change, and the time to change is now. So the church then organized a meeting of the mayors. Again, this was a teamwork between this academy and Jeff Sachs and others. So why did they pick cities? Remember, when the population reaches 9.5 billion by 2050 or so, 75% are going to live in cities. So the change has to come in cities. It was a remarkable meeting, such a positive meeting of mayors, one by one saying how they're going to change. So it was in that meeting, sitting on that huge podium, I realized, my goodness, now we have a new alliance between science, religion, and policy. And I took great hope from that. So, came from that was the declaration. You can see Papa Francisco signed that first, and all of us followed. It talks about the effective control of humanity's climate change should be bolstered. Okay? Hopefully, this message would be read loud and clear at COP21 a month from now. So taking the cue from this, I started working with my university, University of California. We have 10 campuses with a total population of 500,000, probably the largest public institution in the US. So we had decided to go carbon neutral in 10 years, and California is a leader in cutting greenhouse gas emissions. So we said, can we take this as living laboratory and develop top 10 solutions to bend the curve? I see this whole climate change, our population problem with population, GDP, everything is going up. We got to bend those curves, okay? So this was a meeting of, just like this audience here, physicists, chemists, ethicists, people, religious scholars, and 50 of us worked nonstop for 5 months, okay? And they call me the hardest taskmaster they've ever seen. And mind you, we came with 10 solutions, top 2 and 3 for societal transformation. We, of course, talk about things like heat pumps, nuclear power, solar, wind, fuel cells. But everyone agreed, particularly the technologists, that this is not a solution of technology. We are just a means. You've got to change society. So the item 2, if I can read to you, foster global culture of climate action through coordinated public communication and education at local to global scales. And that is why I signed on to Pierre as soon as he approached me for this meeting. That it comes key. We got to change our attitude. We got to change we look at nature. It's not limitless. When you see air pollution in your cities, that's a clear evidence that it's not limitless. It's telling you that it has reached the capacity. Same thing with our rivers. The third is the one which talks about we need a coalition between religions, science, and policy. And in America, we are left behind 145 million Americans. They still don't believe in climate change. So we got to teach this at every church, every temple, every mosque, every synagogue to get bottom-up support. That was the conclusion. This academics, top academics in the world, but really influenced by Laudato Si. So it's having a profound impact on the community. That shows I have, oh yeah, this is a 5-minute warning or 2 minutes? All right, I'm done in 2 minutes. So this is my last slide. So what's my wish list? While climate change is one of several major sustainability problems, with experts sitting here, I'm not going to claim climate change is the only sustainability, it's just one, but it has become a poster child for unsustainable consumption. When you have 1 trillion tons of CO2, that's not sustainable. And it's also, I think, a failure of our current models of growth. That's a conclusion by our economists. Das Gupta, Joe Stiglitz, and Jeff Sachs wrote that sentence in our declaration. So why do I call it a poster child? Climate change is already experienced. We heard spectacularly in this morning about how climate change causes conflict, and it's going to get worse. My only hope, prayer when I go to sleep, is that all of us, 10,000 scientists, are wrong, and 3 or 4 skeptics who claim this will go away are right. That's our only hope at this stage. So what do we need to do? We need really revolutionary changes in our education system that can facilitate the change of our attitude towards each other and nature, exactly what Laudato Si calls for. We then need to develop new paradigm that can formulate, analyze, and develop predicting models for integral ecology. None of our models either account or even know about the interaction between humans and nature. And that's why they're not predictive. When I say 3 degrees, I'm just talking about scenarios. Don't mistake it for prediction. it could be 2 or 3 times as large. Thank you.